I can't say I'm much of a fan of them when I go back to think about all the movie remakes that have flopped. In my opinion, I think a bad movie remake will leave an even worse aftertaste in a movie that you had no expectations for. If you're going to see a movie remake, chances are that you have some attachment to the original film, so going to see something that you originally enjoyed, have it be horrendous, I think it's even deeper wound than a movie you didn't have any care for its success. Now, movie remakes are a very interesting style of filmmaking. I'm going to try not slander the idea of making movie remakes too much, but I won't lie, I have a very big bias towards their formulas. The way movie remakes are made is that the rights to the original movie may be sold or claimed by another company, or maybe a script will be floating around Hollywood before a production company decides to pick it up. After that, the movie company will begin work on transforming an already existing premise and movie screenplay to be adapted. They go through the basic processing of hiring all the actors and cinematographers like any other movie company might do, and then you begin making the product. Now, Hollywood knows very well how they would bring in audiences to watch a movie they've made because they've done it for decades. It doesn't take much to convince someone to see a product they may have already enjoyed once, especially if they already have the notion that it might be good. I think the prime word in there is might because it kind of hints how Hollywood markets their movie remakes. Hollywood loves to get those feelings of nostalgia to reemerge when they're showing trailers or teasers of their movie remakes, because they know if they can evoke those emotions, they have a very good chance the viewer will come into the movie trying to experience those same feelings again. Basically, when Hollywood has their movie remake in their mind, they're not too worried about filling in the seats for the box office. When creating any type of movie, there is a formula called the risk return, and this formula is basically about how much will come back from what we risk. So when creating an abstract idea, or really any movie idea, directors and producers have to be worried about how they will make their money back. Now, how does Hollywood movie remakes companies basically completely skip this formula and allow them to make whatever they want without having to worry about the risk or return? Well, when a movie company decides to pick up the task of a movie remake, they are picking up the task of reinventing an already created script, plot, character design, and so forth. Meaning they are not investing very much at all in writers or producers to create unique new content, because remakes usually incorporate all the same ideas with an interesting twist that can come in different forms. Usually this reimagination will have something to do with a relative adaptation of the times the movie is being remade. Usually this difference is between something like a movie that was made in the 1980s. If it's remade in the 2000s, you're going to see an obvious difference in the times that it's being made in. They are essentially avoiding the risk of investing money into creating new ideas that will be received well, because if previous numbers have already shown them that the ideas were already received well, there's no need to spend too much time to reinvent those ideas. So without worrying about how much you put in, there's really no reason to not make a movie remake, because you have a very, very high chance of already making a good return. So who is to say if a movie remake is good or not? If you don't include the critic's critical eye of choreography, script making, and everything else in the technical aspects of movie making, then the best way we can tell how a movie is good or bad is by the audience. By audience reviews, we can tell the things that were enjoyed by the people that watched them and the overall quality of experience that was received while watching the movie. We can see from websites such as IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes that remakes of once-loved movies do not always carry the same enjoyment. That's not to say that good movie remakes don't exist. The 2016 remake of The Jungle Book was critically acclaimed for how it fully captured the attention of the audience gracefully and improved on many of the original aspects of the magic that made the original film. It actually had a whopping 95% in critic reviews and 87% from viewers, which were both better ratings than the original animated film. So why did this movie remake work so well then? So let's talk about individual cases of movie remakes now. In 2003, there was a South Korean film made by director Park Chan-wook called Oldboy. Now, Oldboy is considered to be one of the greatest revenge films ever made and an overall filmmaking marvel. It was made by impressive storytellers, impressive screenwriters, talented actors, and people who genuinely cared about making something phenomenal. It is also one of the most easily accessed cross-cultural films because of its original reception when it came to the US. People loved it. Now in 2013, there was a remake of this film made by director Spike Lee, and if you know anything about him, he is a very passion-driven director, and his greatest works are all influenced by his passion to make them something unique and interesting. Oldboy 2013 was not a passion project of Spike Lee's. You can see clearly in the interviews with Spike Lee that he is not proud or excited at all to talk about his movies. And if you've seen an interview of him talking about the Black Klansman, he is sporadic and emotionally talking about the way he made the movie and the actors that he's working with. He's proud and excited to talk about it, and he wants to share it with people because he wants people to see it. And in the interviews for his Oldboy 2013 remake, he's often slouching in his chair, or he's slumped over and has no emotion in the way he talks about the movie. He doesn't care about it.
So this is a very different kind of project for you. What made the material so compelling for you?
The original film, and also the original film, but the original source too.
Yeah.
The Japanese illustrated novel, the manga.
And now, have you discussed this with either Park Chan-wook or the writers of that original story?
No, Josh did. Before Josh agreed to do the film, he asked Park for his blessing, and Park gave it. Park also said, don't remake my film, make your own film.
But there's certainly some shout-outs to the original.
Oh yeah, definitely. We have to.
Which are great.
We have to give love. There's several homages to Park's film.
I mean, you've been doing your own films for so long. Is it tricky to do your own version of something that you're probably very familiar with?
No, it wasn't hard, but it's not like we had ingrained in my mind, you know, shots and stuff like that. It was really more a feel, tone, not specific shots. Here we are.
Wow, and you were looking for your leading man. And
I wasn't looking, I knew.
You knew.
How did you know?
Yeah,
Did you know each other before?
Well, as I tell him, I knew him before he was born.
Yeah,
It's not a secret.
Yeah.
My brother Denzel Washington is his father. And he was in his first film with Malcolm X.
So
He was 6 years old. So anytime I read a script, automatically I think, who's going to play this part?
Yeah.
And so my brother here, he didn't have to audition, he had to read. I just said.
Besides that, this movie remake remisses all of the original marks and the intentions from the South Korean directors. There is such a disconnect with the intended emotions for the audience and an apparent laziness that lasts throughout the entire movie. In the beginning of the 2003 original, our main character Daisuo is holding a visibly distressed man by their tie over the side of a building, and a shot pans up to the face of Daisu, not clearly shown because of the sun behind him, and he's clenching the tie, and you can see the emotion on the outlines and the features of his face. That's an exciting start to a movie. We don't know what's happening, and we're curious to find out what happens next when the scene transitions. In the 2013 remake, we get Josh Brolin walking through his workplace, where we are immediately given boring exposition telling us he's a father, he's an alcoholic, and he works for a marketing company. There's no suspense-instilling opening scene that makes the audience truly wonder how the opening scene will differ from the true beginning of the movie and why that is. There's no creativity. There's no interest in the storytelling. In the 2003 original, we get exposition that makes sense. Daisu is in prison, drunkenly oversharing and talking about how it's his daughter's birthday, and we get a sense of how much he cares about being a father. From this scene, we are already introduced to new stakes that the audience will have an understanding and sense of empathy for. In the remake, we don't gather from our main character that he really cares at all about being a father. We don't connect with our main character, and therefore we are already starting the movie feeling like we won't care about what happens to him. That's not a good way to start a movie. By the way, if you haven't seen the 2003 Oldboy, you certainly should. It is a fantastic movie. I will not spoil anything else within this video, so please go watch it. And honestly, if you feel like having a good laugh and just want something mindless on your TV to watch with friends or something, go watch the 2013 remake. Preferably watch the 2003 original before the remake. And I guarantee after watching the two back-to-back, you will see a clear difference in the amount of meticulousness between the two films and how they were made. So the next movie I want to talk about is The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project is an interesting and thrilling story about how a group of students try to make this documentary on a local murderer called the Blair Witch, and how their plight when things take a turn for the worse inside the surrounding woods. The story is told through found footage, and the emotions are all felt directly from the characters right as they're experiencing it. There's this sense of eeriness and dread as the audience because the only way we get to experience the events is through an increasingly worn out video camera. The dread comes from having this lack of peripheral vision and lack of knowledge of what's happening. Often we are left waiting for the main character to react to what is happening, and ultimately we as the audience are left as confused and unsettled about the events as the actual characters in the movie are. In the 2016 remake, we get a cowardly reimagination that's too scared to fudge out its own ideas and at the same time fails to hit the same marks that the original movie did. We get the same story, but the remake doesn't deliver us anything that can be considered a creative reimagination. Instead, we get cheap jump scares that add nothing to the overall atmosphere of the movie, and to top it all off, they show us the monster. One of the greatest things about the original Blair Witch Project is that we have to create the monster ourselves in our imagination. There's no way we can try to rationalize what the monster is by seeing it, and that fear of what it could be lives inside of our mind. This thing that's terrorizing these poor kids and creating a living hell for them, that monster has to live up here, in our brain. In the remake, we get a glimpse of what the monster is, and guess what? It's a generic, lengthy, tall, dark figure that most people would see and be like, oh, so that's what it is. It doesn't seem too bad. And it's just like, why? I can't follow why it is I thought that would be more scary than creating a living nightmare within our heads. Probably because it was too hard for them to do that, and they were lazy when creating their final product. Now, after hearing me talk here for about a while now, you must think that I truly just have this disdain for all movie remakes and that they should never be made, ever. Good movie remakes do exist, but they are rare, and the two examples I have coincidentally were animated Disney movies that were remade in live action, and actually were convincingly better in the eyes of both critics and audience members. I mean, if we look at their scores in both movies received on sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, then we can see that critics and audience members both agree that the movie was impressive in its detail and its ability to captivate them for the entire movie. I think it's interesting to note as well that in this age, people are kind of impressed with how far the CGI technology has come and how it can be incorporated to a movie that was already impressive in many aspects to people of a different generation. So I definitely think that it was pretty easy to bring people into this theater seats because you have this older generation of parents that maybe want to share that experience with their kids. Seeing this movie of a generation being remade for another generation, also have this new generation that maybe wants to see where the direction of this movie remake will go with its CGI effects. I definitely think this was a galaxy brain move by Disney production companies. In the end, I think it's definitely hard to fight this idea of movie remakes because it's so enticing to see how a movie remake will actually perform, whether it will bomb in the theaters, as it sometimes always does, or if it'll actually be good, like these Disney remakes that are actually doing pretty well. I just saw Pet Sematary in theaters, and let me tell you, it was super boring. I think that'll probably be my next video, though, because I have that movie still fresh in my mind, so I can talk about it a lot more in detail. So maybe there's no way we can stop the making of movie remakes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there will always be a level of creativity in Hollywood that will always overshadow this idea of remaking movies for no good reason. And we'll always have good and imaginative movies being made. I mean, that's just always a thing that has happened with Hollywood as the years go on. And movies are a cultural commodity. It's pretty subjective in terms of how people will enjoy a movie. And also, I think that talking about bad movies can be just as much fun or even more fun than talking about good ones. So that's all I had for this video. I hope you can come out with some information about how Hollywood does their movie remakes, how they kind of skip that formula of the risk return, how it don't really risk anything with what they're making, and the return is usually always pretty high. And maybe you'll go try some new movies that I've recommended, like Oldboy. Please go see Oldboy. Oldboy is a great, fantastic movie. You will enjoy it. And that's it. See you.